Hello everybody and welcome to Jeff the Pharmacist. Today I want to tackle a very kind of a thorny issue, a prickly sort of issue, and that is, should pharmacists sell diabetic syringes to heroin addicts? So you might be wondering, how can you tell if someone's addicted to heroin? Unfortunately, most of the time they look like heroin addicts do in the movies. I mean, it breaks my heart to say that, and it's really a travesty. Usually heroin addicts, they're usually underweight. Their skin looks kind of clammy, and they always want to buy the longest diabetic syringes. And if you know anything about diabetes, the syringe is supposed to go under the skin into the fat tissue, so usually shorter needles make a lot more sense than an inch-long needle. An inch-long needle maybe for somebody who has incredibly thick skin, or for people that have just kind of become used to using a longer needle. But a lot of times that insulin can get injected into the muscle, and that could actually cause hypoglycemia. So really, an inch-long needle doesn't make sense, especially for a 20-pound underweight diabetic. So typically they buy one pack of syringes that are like an inch-long, 12.7 millimeter needle, and they pay cash for a pack. So there's kind of two schools of thought. So the first school of thought is that pharmacists should sell needles to heroin addicts to prevent the spread and to prevent HIV outbreaks. So there have been some cases of rural HIV outbreaks. The theory is that it's because they didn't have clean needles. Now, just to kind of be a little bit provocative, the reason that most people are buying heroin syringes is not for their sterility. That's my belief. It's not for their sterility. It's for their sharpness. So heroin users will reuse needles as long as they can, but the problem is that the needles get blunter and blunter every time you use them. And you can imagine that going into a vein, that can cause quite a bit of damage, and there's like interstitial kind of leakage, and the hands and stuff, they get all kind of puffy and everything. So now there's kind of a second class of customer that will come and buy needles. That is kind of this like the steroid injector, and they're always like huge, so you can kind of tell they're like just really buff, and they're asking for a 10-pack of needles. And I actually turned a guy down who was buying a 10-pack of needles because that was the store's policy at the time. And he started yelling at me that he wasn't a junkie, that he just likes to get jacked and all this stuff. So it was kind of a little bit scary, actually. There's like this massive like person addicted to weightlifting, like, I'm like, is he gonna like beat me up in the parking lot or something? But he did not. So I'm here to tell you the story. Now, the second school of thought on this issue is there's kind of a few arguments. The first is that if that person is caught with the syringes after they use it for heroin, that's actually I think it's a misdemeanor, or it's a crime. So you're actually furnishing somebody something to commit a crime with, even though it is a crime against their own person. But at the same time, you're in some way involved in that person's drug use by furnishing them the needles. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that if you fancy your establishment a family establishment, maybe you don't want people that are heroin addicts coming into your store. It is a certain element. It might increase your shrink, your theft. I don't know. It's kind of weird to say, but it is a certain kind of an element, heroin addicts, especially if they're further along in their addiction. it becomes more and more obvious that they have a problem. Everybody else can tell, and it's like, who was that guy? You know, the next customer is usually like, who was that guy? And you're like, I don't know. He was just buying, you know, he's buying needles. You know, it's kind of awkward. So the way the different states handle it is different. So some states actually require a prescription. Some states require proof of that you have a need. Usually if a heroin addict is buying syringes, they don't say, I need syringes for myself. They usually say, you know, my aunt is diabetic and she needs 10 syringes. Most of the time people with diabetes will buy syringes on a prescription because they're often covered. Most of the time they're not buying it over the counter. You know, there's also the old, like, the people that come in for dogs or for cats that have diabetes because we're feeding them like grain and, you know, carbohydrates, and they're getting like human diabetes type illnesses. And so we're selling them, you know, $100 a vial insulin and syringes that can be like $30, $40 a box. And, you know, they don't really need a prescription. You can almost always tell, or it's usually irregular. Most of the time, people that are coming in for using syringes are either new to the store, or you actually know them to be kind of drug seekers. So again, the kind of the second argument is, you know, it's kind of not a family element, or not a good element to bring into the store. You might have more shoplifting because there obviously is a money crunch that comes with being a drug addict. You lose your job, you need money for drugs. That money has to come from somewhere. Family, friends, stealing, you know, maybe even drug dealing. So like I said before, different states deal with the issue differently. So some it is illegal, some they kind of put it on the pharmacist. In the state of Maryland, they kind of put it on the pharmacist to decide, do you want to sell needles or do you not want to? They actually issued a letter, the State Board of Pharmacy actually issued a letter saying prevention of HIV is a legitimate medical need. So they kind of have their stance on it, but they do not say that the pharmacist has to or doesn't have to. So I want to know, what do you guys think? I know it's, I know usually when I talk to people, that are kind of part of the non like pharmacy public or whatever, just everybody that's not involved in pharmacy or medicine, it's usually, most of them usually want pharmacists to sell needles. When I talk to other pharmacists, it's really like 50-50 because I think pharmacists just get kind of annoyed with heroin addicts. They're not the easiest customers. They kind of butt the line, or they don't really know what they want at the same time as well. So it's like they'll say like, I just want the long tip needles. It's like, so grandma needs long tip needles, like, you know, I mean, so it is 50-50. The other half is like, we're preventing the spread of HIV, and that, you know, the state will have to treat that HIV. And so, what do you guys think? I know it's kind of a thorny issue. I want to know what your take is. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Again, I'd love to hear your feedback about this issue, especially in the midst of the greatest drug addiction crisis that the country's ever seen. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Thanks a lot.